Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. And Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good. You know, when I started thinking about our program today, I wanted to talk about the so-called influence of Russia in our elections and just what the meaning of this was, because there's a lot of attention. But at the time, I was thinking just about, the charges made, what did they do, and what information was out there. But since then, other things have developed because we've had, more accusations around what we are calling Russiagate. How much has Russia been involved? And then we had this release that came out of the Lavrov meeting claiming that, the president did it, he committed treason, this sort of escalation, that he said something to Lavrov, and that was a bit of hype too. Then all of a sudden, on top of all this, it gets messier, and now there's revelation that we have to be more determined than ever against Assad because there's a crematorium there, and he's been killing people, of course, without too much evidence of what's going on, and that has prompted the call from, an Israeli minister say, well, that's time to assassinate him, on and on. So it's there's a lot of activity there, and actually it's a bigger issue to talk about than what I was thinking about originally, just talking about these accusations, which I didn't think there was much to, and there's been proof of nothing. And my immediate reaction to that was, well, I thought they would bring up the subject in their inability to defend themselves from this. Why don't they bring up the subject of Hillary? You'd think that would have been good politics, but that doesn't seem to happen. But this is a mess, and I would like to try to get this all sorted out.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we can do that, but we'll give it a shot. Yeah, every day something comes out in the mainstream media, about, aha, gotcha, this is the one, this is the smoking gun. Trump is really Putin's agent, and yesterday it was this big revelation. Of course, like always, it's unnamed current and former intelligence officers have reported to the Washington Post that President Trump said something in the meeting with Lavrov having to do with laptop bombs and the ability of jihadists to use them as weapons that was super, super secret. Of course, there were only a couple of people in the room, including the National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster. Well, he came and went on the record right afterward and said, this is absolutely false. I was there. I'm on the record saying this didn't happen. And of course, his rebuttal was in the 8th paragraph of the Washington Post's very salacious, article about how Trump is a traitor.
And some people claim the mainstream media fair and balanced, and anybody who looks at this carefully have to be pretty cynical about the whole thing. Why listen to them? Of course, that's what a big argument is going on and existed in the campaign about the fake news and what's going on. And I would think somebody who doesn't spend a lot of time, like hours, like we do, in trying to figure this out, why they wouldn't be just really disgusted about to whom should they believe in, and of course, I think we're still capable of getting the truth out, but not by these pronouncements and these accusations. So I believe what is going on now is a struggle for power, because I've always been convinced there's not that much difference in policy, even with this yelling and screaming. But when you see a Chuck Schumer up there, demagoguing as he has, switching around on his positions, it has to do with power and control, and not on policy. For instance, right now I see when the things like this happen, it seems like the Republicans should have a stronger defense. It's almost like they go along with the distraction, or they perpetuate it instead of going to the issue. But I saw one headline today having to do with NATO in the United States, and that was building up tremendous permanent stations on Russia's border, military stations. Why aren't they investigating this? That to me should be one of the most important things that our government is doing here. The money is there. Don't say a word. It's not the Republicans. It's not the Democrats. It's the establishment. So in spite of what we see as the deep state looks like they're attacking Trump. But when it comes to policy, there's no real dispute over that. But so that makes it more difficult. The way I see it lining up right now is, these groups. There's the Trump and the Tea Party people trying to appease them and keep them happy. At the same time, you take the Paul Ryans getting along pretty well with the Democrats. And what is their ultimate motive? Who's to gain? If they have a totally weakened presidency, and there are some people do that. Is it just personal? We just don't like this guy. If there's no difference in policy, it's really a messy situation and something that could quickly get out of hand.
Yeah, I don't think we'd object to a weakened presidency, but unfortunately it's weakened in the wrong way for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And I often wonder, why aren't the Democrats, it seems like Trump would be the perfect person to go at for his policies, the things that he's doing and says he wants to do that would be perfect for progressives and Democrats to criticize. And I'd wonder, why is it that they're going after this crazy dead end that somehow he's a Russian puppet or something? They even were crazy enough to say that how dare they let a Russian photographer in? He's planting bugs, as if we're in 1960 or something, and you go and you put things under the phone. That's how crazy it's gotten. But I think you hit on it when we were talking before the show, because they don't disagree on the main things: the troops on the border, regime change in Syria, all of these things that they all agree.
And maybe they figure Hillary's been weakened enough, because if we were truly just in, the political party and philosophy battle, and we're getting clobbered, like the White House is getting clobbered right now, why wouldn't they say, I was elected to check out this Hillary stuff? And I think, from what I read, there's more evidence that she was much more deeply involved in shenanigans with Russia monetarily, and with her donations and all the foundation.
Yeah.
She was deeply involved, and Podesta was involved, and his brother was involved. There were so many people involved, but we don't even hear a word. So if they were really, really worried about this, they control the House and they control the Senate and they have the bully pulpit. You would think that, last time I think Trump was, he got the crowds all riled up when he said, we're going to put her in jail.
Yeah.
Now I'm not so anxious that putting her in jail is going to solve the world's problem, but they could at least go after the truth about this as to neutralize some of these things that we at least see as, fiction, some of these accusations. But they don't, they go back. But to me, it just might be that they don't want to disturb policy, whether it's Federal Reserve Board policy, welfare spending policy, the military-industrial complex, putting troops on the Russia. Can you imagine if the biggest news of the week would be United States expands its aggression, they put military bases on the borders of Russia? That would be like Russia putting missiles and tanks on the Mexico border.
Yeah.
But it's not even mentioned. Supported by Republicans and Democrats, and they have all the money they want, and they do it in the name of national security interest. And yet, who helps to do this? NATO. Oh, I thought Trump didn't like NATO. Well, I guess he gets along with them enough as long as they do what he tells them to do, and he might send them a bill. Who knows?
Yeah, it does seem like all around him. We don't have a lot of sympathy on this show for what President Trump has claimed he wants to do and what he's doing in many ways, but it seems he's surrounded. Yesterday, even Tillerson, his own Secretary of State, said, well, I think the Russians were fiddling around in our elections.
Yeah.
It means his own boss is illegitimate in some way. Of course, he's never said anything about what it might be, what they might have done. Nobody knows what they might have done. They just fiddled around, and that's enough to know. But of course, we would never do that, would we?
No, it turns out that that's one of the points that I've tried to make many times. An important point is, that we ought to look to ourselves when we start charging other people with problems. And now we're charging Russia with something which there's no evidence of, and not that they might not be capable of, but they might just be smart enough to think it's not worth the effort. At least they'd probably be smart enough never to get caught at it the way they think are doing. But I think it's our policies that we have a responsibility for. But how many times have we had a hearing about is it moral and correct and constitutional and wise? Does it have anything to do with protecting national security for us to be the biggest purveyor of undermining other elections and other governments? We now are the biggest ever in the history of the world. That's my opinion. Mm-hmm. 81 times documented from 1945 to the year 2000. So a lot has happened. This hasn't even included the reason that we have been involved in a regime change. But sometimes it's not sneaky at all. It's not paid lobbyists like. Right now, there are a couple countries that have paid lobbyists come in and interfere with us, but they're our friends and they're allies. But no, there's these 81 countries out there that we've been involved with, and sometimes the CIA picks candidates. You know a few stories about how the CIA picks candidates, and but we use guns and bullets and bombs and assassinations. It's been going on. Are there any investigations? No, there isn't. And I think of the most recent one that we've talked about several times on how we're involved in this, and it's hugely bigger than anything that, even if everything they said about the Russians, it's nothing compared to what we did in undermining the stability in Ukraine and Crimea and what we did with NATO. And that was, the evidence is so clear on how we conspired. And actually there was admission to this, that what was going on. And I think it's just tragic that we get snookered, the people get snookered, and it's all because the Democrats are doing this to the Republicans. The Republicans won't get along with the Democrats. But there sure is a lot of bipartisanship when it comes to funding the military operations around this world. And that is the responsibility of the people to tell their congressmen, quit voting for this stuff. Quit buying into this argument that if I vote against $1 trillion increase in militarization around the world, I'm un-American. maybe if you were America first, you would say, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to be the policeman where I'm going to think about the defense of this country. But that's not the interpretation of America first, especially today. Maybe it was at one time, but the people love it. He cares about America first. But the policies do not. And then that raises the question, if Trump has some of these beliefs, people in his own administration, have actually, worked against him.
Yeah, this is where it gets, I think, really interesting, because the big story today, aside from the leaked information, is the issue of the crematorium, that the State Department yesterday just had to go out and get a press briefing about this crematorium. So it would make you think that they had just discovered this horrible thing. And of course, it evokes the images of the Holocaust in your mind, a horrific thing. They had to rush out. But actually, that's not the case at all. And we'll go to if we have this quote we can put up. This is the acting Assistant Secretary of State for the Near East, Stuart Jones, gave a press briefing, and he showed a satellite picture of this military prison, and he said, this is a crematorium over there. And one astute journalist who's actually doing his job said, what makes you so sure that's a crematorium and not just some other building? Is it because of the snow melt or why? Jones answers back, well, if you look at the construction phase with the AC facilities, the firewall, etc., this would be consistent if they were building a crematorium. And so then the question, good reporter writes back, well, maybe it's just a warmer part of the building why there's a snow melt. Jones, possibly. And if I can just read, because it goes on, and it must be the same reporter, and I suspect I know who it is, but I won't say. The reporter asked him then afterwards, so why are you releasing this today? Is this new information, or are you hoping for a political effect? And here's Jones, a career State Department guy. He'd been ambassador in Iraq. He'd served in numerous places in the Middle East. Here's what he said. Are you just doing this today for political effect? Assistant Secretary, I'd say this information has been developing, and with the meeting last week between Foreign Minister Lavrov and the Secretary, this was an opportune time to remind people the atrocities that are being carried out inside Syria. In other words, this person, this underling, this employee of President Trump is rebuking Trump's successful meeting with Lavrov last week, saying, "Not so fast, Mr. President. Look at this." So he's undermining him completely right here.
And there's no easy answer to explain that. I mean, would Trump do that on purpose? Hardly. But why would he allow it to happen if he's the president and he's a manager? You'd think he would know the difference. But he had a position on foreign policy, but it was not a consistent position. But the appointments were more consistently putting people in that were closer to the neocons, and they were closer to a policy where we're going to work out our problems and be allies or at least friends with Russia. So he gets the other people in. So it's virtually impossible to figure out what he's up to. But the Democrats, who are the true demagogues who want to undermine him, use this as an example. Oh, he doesn't know what he's doing, and therefore we have to, destroy his presidency. And that's a vicious fight. I'm just convinced that's the fight. But it's also a deliberate distraction that they both go along with, because they're not. Maybe the budget would be important right now. Yeah. Maybe the financial markets, which are precarious as all get out right now, maybe that should be a subject. Maybe our military buildup on Russia's borders ought to be, a subject. But no, they don't talk about that. They go back and forth on this, and it seems to serve the purpose of distraction. But I of course, was never too enamored with the candidate Trump, but once the appointments came out, and I think the appointment for the vice president is a telltale sign, because I watch foreign policy so much. It's not that the vice president is wrong on every economic issue. Matter of fact, some of the issues of lower taxes, regulations, at least that's appealing to me. But when it comes to the issue of internationalism and worldwide presence and being a worldwide policeman, that should have given a hint to all the people who say things are going to really change. We are on our move now. And some people claim, well, what's happened to Trump is he was well-intended, he was doing good, but the deep state got to him, and maybe there's a partial truth to that, but I don't think it's that simple. I think that he was probably closer to the people who really run affairs than before, because I don't think he ever took the position of, what do you do about Syria? Bring the troops home. No. Hardly. We'll just send them a bill. So that position was never the same. So it'll come to a climax, because it's so messy. It's going to fail.
Yeah, I think, he's said to be such a good manager. He built this great empire, made lots of money. You'd think that he would be good with personnel. That seems to be a very important thing for a CEO. He seems to be terrible with personnel. He has people in here actively working to undermine him. There are so many positions left unfilled that if he could find, I guess you're right, if he had an ideology, that might work. But I think the question we're facing, the whole reason we decided to do this show today is, what can he do about this ongoing Russiagate thing? We believe it's a bunch of hot air. You suggested, I think, the answer. I think it's a good one, maybe. First of all, shore things up, get your FBI director in there, someone who's loyal. Go after Hillary.
Go after Hillary. And, I wouldn't exclude, I wouldn't just blindly say, there's a little bit of smoke out there, or maybe there is something going on. If there's nothing there, but there has been investigation. I would say investigate and see if the Russians did it. But there's been a bit of that, and they have come up with nothing. So I'm not opposed to that at all. But the whole thing is, if they were working on strategy, I think what they would do is they should divert their attention. But then the argument then becomes, the media's in charge, and no matter what he says or does, the media will twist it around. But believe me, they didn't twist him around during the campaign. He just bypassed the media, and he did a pretty darn good job about it. And he's still pretty good at that job of not kowtowing to the media. But there's a lot of people ganging up on him now for various reasons, and he's vulnerable, we're vulnerable, because nobody can figure it out. all I want to do is participate in getting the president to be more consistent, to follow the things that he said that I liked, working more closely with the Russians and dealing with the tax code and things like that. But I think Daniel just mentioned the real problem. He doesn't come from a philosophy that has a basis to it. He doesn't come from, he talks about the Constitution, but in reality, I don't think it's related to that. It's a utilitarian, pragmatic approach, and a lot of these things he has not dealt with before. And it might be a little bit different than building a skyscraper, and I imagine it is. You can't quite be the same boss that you are when you're the boss of building a skyscraper. But anyway, I think people should be very cautious when they look at the media, and it's piling on right now. And I think there's a gross distortion about this Russiagate, the investigation, and blaming Russia for everything. We should look to ourselves, and if Russia's involved, we should know about it. But I'll tell you what, the biggest thing this country ought to do is look inwardly. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not being un-America and being dismissed. Yeah, you're one of those blame America first people. No, we want to know the truth first and let the chips fall where they may and make America the country it was supposed to be, that championed liberty and had a republic that defended smaller units of government, not a monolithic government, not only in our own country, but a world government and a world empire. There's where the real evil is, and there's no authority for that. There's no moral authority for it, and there's no legal authority for it, no constitutional authority, and there's no practical reason for it. And we're reaching the end point of the empire, and it's going to come down, and it's going to have an economic calamity associated with it, as well as the fact that our foreign policy will change. It's going to change for the better, because we won't be able to pursue the empire, and it will come when the worldwide financiers and the people involved decide, well, maybe the dollar is risky business. And that happens, everything else is going to change. And I believe it's going to change for the better, and there's reason to be optimistic, because there's a lot of people out in the country that aren't heard from but share the views of personal liberty and limited government, and we just have to rally the troops and make sure they're available when the rebuilding comes, and that might not be too far off. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.